morning, everybody. My name is Karen Styborski, and I'm the president of Clama. I'm excited to welcome you here today to hear a little bit about how the lake is doing this year and find out what Clama is doing moving forward. I'm going to start off with some thank yous, and I missed one last year. Probably the most important one is thanking Armstrong for being here, because they filmed this and make it available so that if you're not able to be here this morning, you can still plug in and find out what we talked about. And they're such a great resource for the community, always supporting community events like this. So we're very lucky to have a local cable station that can do that for us. Also, I want to thank volunteers of Clama. This year we had an amazing committee for the Clama Bash, and we have a lot of people excited going into next year, so it's a very nice addition. And if you're interested in watching this, volunteering for the Clama Bash, we're going to have a kickoff meeting sometime this summer, so let me know and we'll make sure you're included. I want to thank all of the donors, because all of the money we get is from donations. We apply for grants and things like that, but the primary source of income for Clama is donations and donors like you. And the board. The board serves tirelessly. This year in particular, we have been busy at work over the winter, and we're going to be unveiling some of that now. You can see here, this is our logo. So pretty soon Clama will be the same as Nike. You'll be able to see that little symbol and know that's Clama. So you'll see that in branding that's going to be going out soon, and in all of the places that we communicate with you. So it's exciting to be able to start to put a picture with us and to create more of a brand identity. With that, if you want to change the slide there. Clama was very busy this winter creating our strategic plan. We were founded in 1996, so we have to look forward to the future of how Clama is going to exist and move forward. So far it has been all 100% volunteer-based, and that's worked, but we need to make sure that we are able to operate in perpetuity, because the lake is always going to be there. So you probably can't see most of the things on here, but this will be available so that you can read that, because the screen doesn't see that very well. Our mission statement is rather lengthy, so we whittled that down. So a catchy phrase that people can hold on to is to keep the waters of Conneaut Lake safe, healthy, and beautiful. That's what Clama exists for. We are all about the water. We have 3 strategic focuses that we're working on right now. One is to enhance that sustainable business model so that we're able to move forward well, create financial stability, diversify our funding streams so we don't always have to keep asking for money, and education, because that's one of the primary purposes is people need to understand what we do and need to understand the lake, and that's one of the drivers as for the lake talk that we're here for today as well. Another focus of this is when people can see what we're working on. You know, we're always asking for volunteers, but if you look up here and see something that you're particularly good at, you can say, oh, I can go for this project and lend my expertise in this way. Or I do marketing, look, we're working on improving brand awareness this year. Maybe I have something to do that can help. So we can always use input from volunteers that have more expertise on particular areas than we do. So right now I'm going to introduce Doug Peters. He is our treasurer, and he is going to talk a little bit about the state of Clama and why our needs are so great.
Okay. Well, let me blow this up for you, since I'm technically challenged. My name is Doug Peters. I'm the treasurer of Clama, and I manage the harvesting program. Bob Santora manages the herbicide program. Today I'm pinch hitting for Bob with the report that I'm going to give you guys. But first and foremost, I would like to introduce our harvester master. John Tracy, would you please stand? John is the fire chief in the borough, and John is the one that keeps that doggone thing going. John, thank you so much for your We have a double-pronged problem right now, and that is that that invasive weed called hydrilla, and all you folks have probably heard of it, is now evident in Conneaut Lake. The map that I put up only comes down to Midway. I tried to blow it up so you could specifically see where hydrilla has been found in the lake. The bottom 2 red dots are at Midway, and the Army Corps of Engineers came in here last year in September, early in September, with 2 pontoons armed with people in kayaks, and they profiled the entire lake. And these were the areas where hydrilla was found. Now, we started out originally with just up here near the North Launch was where hydrilla was first seen. It's been in pine and tuning for a few years, so we knew that it was going to be here. So your board had proactively put together a program to react quickly. And from the minute we first sighted hydrilla, within 48 hours we had our herbicide team from downstate here treating it. You can see how far it's spread already. And the reason it spreads is we have people coming into this lake that don't clean their gear. They don't clean their trailers, they don't clean their boats, and they're dragging that into our lake. Hydrilla is so invasive that in Florida, there are lakes that are so inundated with this weed that you cannot navigate a boat. They literally will take a harvester and they will harvest the perimeter of the water so people can go around in a circle, but they can't cross the lake. We're a little bit lucky in that hydrilla will grow to about 25 feet in depth, which is deeper than a lot of weeds that are native to our lake. But our lake being a glacial kettle lake is deep enough that there's a lot of places it won't grow. But you still got to get your boat out to go take care of the lake. Our budget the amount of money we spent in 2022 for herbicide treatment was $13,287. With the advent of hydrilla, last year we spent $30,550. This year, with still one treatment to go, we've already spent $37,460, and each treatment's about $14,000. So we will spend this year over $50,000 to treat the weeds in this lake, where in 2022 we spent $13,000. The trick with hydrilla is you cannot harvest it. It's a ribosome-based weed, and it propagates when you cut it exponentially. And so the only way you can take care of this is with herbicide. And it's a pellet-projected herbicide that sinks to the bottom in the area, and all those dots are GPS located. And so we treat that precisely. We have one more treatment so far this year coming in the lake. It's July 19th. If they see more evidence of hydrilla in different places, we're going to have another treatment. So we'll be up, and we were told to budget $70,000 this year by our herbicide treaters for herbicide. So if we need one more treatment, if they find beyond what we see here on July the 19th when they do the treatment, we're going to be up close to that 70 grand that they told us about. So imagine, if you will, we used to worry about $13,000, and now we're worrying about $70,000 a year, and we think the number is probably going to go up before it goes down. So that's the reason why, please talk it up out there. Give us a hand raising funds, because we still, being totally volunteer, there's no grant money out there for us to take care of this. We got to raise some money ourselves. So thank you very much.
Two questions real quick.
Yeah.
So there's nothing on the lower side?
There's nothing below Midway right now.
Nothing below Midway.
That's the reason why I did the map like I did, so you could see it in detail. There's nothing down in our bay below Midway.
The other question is, why there's no grants or something like this? I'm not familiar. So
I'm not saying there aren't grants, but the problem is, you know what? There's 1 million people applying for the same pot of money. And we've been successful getting some grants in the past to help us buy a new conveyor and things like that. And we do have an opportunity. Then the Crawford County Conservation District is helping us formulate a plan where we might be able to get some money. But as you might imagine, you know, when the pot is this big and the donors are this big, or the people that want it is this big, it's really competitive to get it. So that's the reason.
Have we seen any reduction? Do we know how it's doing?
We, at this point, all we can do is treat and then look. And the next treatment we'll know, because it's generally toward the late August or July into early August when it grows enough that you can see it. And so when they come in to actually do the treatment, they're going to check the lake, and they'll be able to tell whether the treatment is being effective at that point in time.
And will they also be able to tell if it's sprayed?
Yes, they'll be able to. That's why they're coming when they will, so they can, you know, have an opportunity visually to check. And John and his team with the harvester, they're looking for it while they cut. John, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we look for it every time we bring a load in. You know, we have somebody on the conveyor and watching it. It's very close to another weed. And what surprised me, I learned last year, they took me out, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers took me out and showed me exactly what it looked like. And it was surprising. There's another weed that had, when it comes up, it has each little spot on the stem, on the, the branch basically has a little cluster of leaves. And there's 3 on one plant, and I forget what it's called, but there's 5 on the hydrilla. And we've been seeing it now that I know what it looks like. So we do look for it. The ones down there at Midway, those are right in front of Bill's Marina. And what we figured was somebody was boating on the lake, picked it up somewhere, went down there to get gas, fell off the boat while they were sitting there.
And
So,
you'll be able to tell because the leaves are they're not very big and they're jagged.
but each leaf is about half the size of my little fingernail. They're very small, which is a cluster of
And
5.
so it turns into a mat. So, thanks, guys.
Just in a couple of responses, it's not been seen at the south end yet. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not there, because the Army Corps of Engineers did come and do a survey, but they can't possibly look at every single plant. So we really rely on people that are on the water to be vigilant and report it, because it was first found because a volunteer reported it. And that's why we were able to act so quickly, because they reported it to the Conservation District and got the information out there. So while a plant survey is done, they can't guarantee anything, but yes.
You can Google it, and there's some great pictures of it. And like I said, if you find it, and if you have it, get a hold of one of the,
Report it to the
Karen does, or
Conservation District or report it
any
to
of us on the
Glenna and we'll make
harvester,
sure the
just
information
show
gets
us.
where it needs to go.
We'll take a look at it and see if it is hydrilla, then we'll add it to the list.
So thank you, Doug, also for reminding me to thank the harvester team because they do a great job for us as well. So next I want to introduce our featured speaker today, Dr. Milt Ostrofsky. He is a PhD limnologist, served Allegheny College for many years, and we have been incredibly fortunate of CLAMA to have Milt on our board because everything that we have done over the years has been based in science and research that he's done and had access to, and that saved CLAMA thousands and thousands of dollars not to have to pay for all the services as well. So it's been quite a financial benefit as well as a knowledge benefit. So his talk is on cyanobacterial blooms, but you'll notice the flyer said harmful algal blooms because that's more language we can all relate to. Welcome, Milt. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'll send you a bill, Karen. Over the past few years, there have been many beach closings. I think you've heard of them at, say, Edinburgh Lake, and just this week, the Linesville Beach was closed on Punitoni Reservoir due to algal blooms. Historically, most of the beach closing has been caused by geese. If you've been to Woodcock, Colonel Crawford Park in Woodcock, you know that walking to the water is a kind of a trial if you're in bare feet, given the number of geese there. And their fecal remains wash into the water and boost the E. coli content. So most of the beach closings historically, at least in this area, have been due to geese. But more recently, beach closings are due to harmful algal blooms. And the culprits are the cyanobacteria. So if you look at a water sample, it looks very clear, but there are microscopic photosynthetic organisms growing in it. And they are, the typical size is about 1 micron, which is if you took a meter, which is about 10% larger than a yard, and divided it into 1 million equal pieces, that's what a micron is. So these organisms are incredibly small, a micron, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 microns. The way we know that they're present is if you take a water sample that looks ostensibly clear and run it through a filter. Hit me, Doug. You can see it, and the colors are distorted a little bit, but that's kind of bright green on the right, and a filter that has not had water run through it is the one on the left. So these organisms accumulate on the filter. I think a liter of water went through this filter, a little over a quart. And there's lots of green on there, and those are the millions and millions of individual cells that are trapped on the filter surface. And these organisms are called collectively phytoplankton. Phyto because they are chlorophyll containing, and they photosynthesize much like ferns or maple trees or beans or whatever. when certain populations of these phytoplankton increase to large enough size, they'll sometimes color the water, turn the water greenish looking. And this is the case when we have an algal bloom. So the organisms that we're concerned about are in fact not algae at all, they're bacteria. They're very different from algae. They have no nucleus. They're, if you remember your high school biology, they're called prokaryotes, not eukaryotes. They don't have membrane-bound organelles. But this is a very common one causing blooms. This is Anabina flossaqua. The individual cells are little round barrel-shaped things, subcylindric. The typical size is about 6 by 8 microns. And they form filaments. And the next one is Aphanizomenon flossaqui. And this one is more cylindrical, round in cross-section, but elongated. And again, they form filaments, and sometimes they notably form rafts. That is, the filaments will stick together, and sometimes they'll be visible. You see flakes, very small flakes in the water. And the next one is Microcystis aeruginosa. Again, these are 4 microns in diameter, but they form sheets. So these are not multicellular organisms, they're individual cells that are colonial. Multicellular implies there's some differentiation in function. Okay, liver tissue, kidney tissue, whatever, but these cells all behave exactly the same, they just hang out together in either a filament or as a plate. So before I vilify these blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, for some reason they've been called blue-green algae for years because they have a pigment, an accessory pigment alongside chlorophyll. It's called phycocyanin. It's kind of a bluish-green pigment. So they were called cyanobacteria or blue-green algae, but they're not algae. Before I vilify the cyanobacteria, we owe them a debt of gratitude. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, and the early atmosphere of the Earth consisted of carbon dioxide, ammonia, water vapor, small amounts of methane, and only 1/20th of 1% was oxygen. About 3.5 billion years ago, the first forms of life appeared, and they were the bacteria, some various forms of bacteria, and some of them are photosynthetic. And what photosynthetic organisms do is take up carbon dioxide and as a waste product in the photosynthetic process release oxygen. So the Earth has gone from 1/20th of 1% oxygen in the atmosphere to fully 21% oxygen today. So thank you very much. It allows terrestrial life and ocean life to persist and prosper. So why should we be concerned about cyanobacteria and what causes their dominance in lakes? They have 3 characteristics that enable them to dominate at particular times of lakes. All photosynthetic organisms need light. Cyanobacteria are no different. They are photosynthetic, they need light, but they don't need too much light. There's a Goldilocks position where they need more than dim light. They have to photosynthesize enough to generate enough energy to meet metabolic demands, but too much light bleaches out the pigments. So they need to be in a zone in the lake where the light is optimal, not too much, not too deep. And how would they do that? Well, lakes are turbulent. Wind across the lakes mixes the water, and in Conneaut Lake, typically, the water is mixed down to a depth of about 7 meters, maybe 25 feet or so. And you can verify this if you take temperature readings every couple of feet down the water. It's all the same. So wind-generated currents will mix this lake pretty well. The problem is, if you're a photosynthetic organism, you spend part of your time in very dim light if you're mixed down deep, and part of your time up where it's too bright. So these organisms have figured out a way to regulate their buoyancy. They produce little tiny gas vesicles inside each little tiny cell, and the gas vesicles provide buoyancy. Now the problem is, when there's even gentle breezes across the lake, the cells get mixed deep, and then up to the surface, then deep again. So on average, they're in suboptimal light. So they'll increase the number of gas vesicles per cell. What happens when the wind stops? Suddenly these things are overbuoyant, and they drift up to the surface and form a scum on the surface. So I think the next slide, I hope. Yeah, these are some data, old data, 1968. from a lake in England, and Anabenus urcinalis. This is a different species, but the same genus, Anabenus, that we showed you earlier. On May 21st, samples were taken at various depths in the water column, and the width of this bar indicates the density of the population of this particular species. It's pretty breezy then. That you see that the cells are pretty well evenly mixed from 1 meter, or from surface all the way down to 9 meters, which would be about 35 feet or so. But then a calm period occurred, no wind. And what happened to the algal cells? By May 2, they're all up on the surface, forming a thick scum. So this, even though there may not have been any more cells at the time, they're all concentrated right on the surface. And if you see a cyanobacterial bloom, that's scum on the surface, sometimes you can go park the waters like Moses, and you see it's actually quite clear underneath. Relatively clear. It's pea soupy on the surface. So here's some experiments I did many years ago. A couple of colleagues and I were working on blue-green algal cyanobacterial populations in Conneaut Reservoir, and just for kicks on the side while we were incubating stuff, I did some experiments, and Doug, get it in. This is a glass cylinder, and I scooped up some water from Conneaut, shook it up so the cells were uniformly distributed, put it in the cylinder, and 30 minutes later, you see it's relatively clear here, but the cells are concentrated up near the surface. So these cells are positively buoyant. Yeah, this one is.
I go too far.
Nope, no, that's. Did you go?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. This one. These are 2 water samples of exactly the same. I took a bucket of water, mixed it up, and poured it in 2 glasses or 2 bottles. And what I did on this one, you notice it's relatively clear. This one's milky. You see the difference?
Yeah.
What I did is put a stopper in this bottle and pounded it with my fist, and it ruptured all the gas vesicles. So you see it's milky here because there's little gaseous inclusions in every cell, making it looking like you're looking through a shower door. And here it's clear, like it's cooling. There's no diffraction because of the air bubbles. And if you give it enough time, the ones where the air bubbles or gas bubbles are collapsed, all the cells have sunk. And in the other one, they've all accumulated near the surface. So that is something about buoyancy regulation. So what we need in order to have a cyanobacterial bloom, we would need to have a lake that's circulating, allowing the cells to become overbuoyant, trying like mad to get up where the light is better, but then have it suddenly a calm period, and they overcompensate and drift up to the surface. So we've seen that. You've seen that. Okay, the next slide. Cyanobacterial blooms sometimes look like somebody spilled paint on the water. And this is a shot from Tamarack Lake. This is an ore shaft. The blade is underwater. It's not very appealing. I think you can agree. So sometimes it looks like that. And other times, the next slide is in Shelburne Pond, Vermont. And again, they're not forming a surface concentration, but they're pretty thick throughout the water. Yeah.
Would that previous slide be an example of them overcompensating?
Yeah, this is as well. I mean, if you were to maybe go out away from shore a bit and part the waters, maybe a couple of feet down, it's a lot clearer, a lot less green. They would still be there. So that's one of the characteristics, is buoyancy regulation. Another characteristic is nitrogen fixation. And I think you're familiar with the bacteria that live in root nodules of clover and other legumes. They fix atmospheric nitrogen, and that's why alfalfa and clover make a good green manure. Help me out here. Do you? You're familiar with that. I know you are.
Yes.
Okay, absolutely perfect. Okay. So all organisms require a collection of nutrients. And there are macronutrients, those are required in large amounts, and micronutrients, those are required in fairly trace amounts. The macronutrients are carbon, the symbol is C, hydrogen, H, oxygen, O, phosphorus, P, potassium, K, nitrogen, N, sulfur S, calcium Ca, iron Fe, and magnesium Mg. So if you need to remember these for a quiz later on, the letters again are CHOPKNSCAFEMG. That's C. Hopkins Cafe, mighty good. And the micronutrients are copper, Cu, zinc, Zn, molybdenum, Mo, boron, B, manganese, Mn, and chloride, Cl. And that's Cu, Zn, Mo, B, Mn, Cl. Cousin Mo goes at the men's club, just if you want to remember these for any reason. Now, and there's some species require bizarre little things like grasses and diatoms. Another form of algae requires silicon for glass cell walls, and some of them require bizarre stuff like vanadium or so on. So some nutrients are in such small supply that they are called limiting. And to illustrate how limiting nutrients must work, this is a barrel analogy. And I think you can see, if you ask, well, how much water can this barrel hold? It seems like the limiting nutrient, or the limiting barrel state here is potassium. We're not going to get any more water than potassium allows it to occur, right? Now what would happen if we put a longer barrel state in for potassium? Well, now nitrogen becomes limiting, because that's the shortest one. So if you think about water chemistry, there's probably some nutrient which is in limiting supply, but if we add more of that element, then something else becomes limiting. And to illustrate in kind of a off-lake example, this is the Great Basin Desert in Utah under natural conditions. Why isn't it green? How come nothing's growing there? What would you expect the limiting material to be?
Water.
Water, yeah, there's abundant sunlight, right? And the soil is pretty rich, actually. So if we add water, we should get a biological response, right? And these are spray irrigators. And these are alfalfa fields in the middle of Utah, of all places. So we have the same issue in water. And normally, phosphorus is a limiting factor because it's not particularly soluble, it sticks to soil particles very well, and it's not very common in the geological milieu. That is, phosphorus is really a minor element to begin with, and its insolubility makes it even more minor, more worse. So we should expect then that phosphorus would be, generally speaking, the limiting element. Doug? And here are some data that were compiled in 1974, I believe, where every one of those dots is a lake where we have both the phosphorus concentration graphed on the x-axis and the summertime average chlorophyll. That if you got weekly and measure chlorophyll, which is the dominant pigment in algae and cyanobacteria, and measure it from, say, Memorial Day to Labor Day during the summer period, we get an average chlorophyll figure. And you see there's a pretty tight relationship. The more phosphorus there is, the more chlorophyll there is, suggesting then that it's certainly a limiting factor. Now the problem is that algae and cyanobacteria require more than just phosphorus. They also require other elements, and one of the other ones is nitrogen. So what would happen if, well, back up 1 second. Algae and bacteria need phosphorus and nitrogen or nitrogen and phosphorus in about a 16-to-1 ratio. So 16 parts of nitrogen and 1 part of phosphorus enables them to make the biochemical machinery for life. What would happen if we started adding phosphorus to the lake through, fertilizing lakeshore lawns with phosphorus-based fertilizer, or washing your car on impervious surface with soapy detergent? Construction sites with soil erosion, allowing phosphorus to come into the lake. Leaky septic systems, leaky sewage treatment plants. Anything that's going to generate phosphorus is going to increase the amount of phosphorus in the water, and that ratio is going to drop. Is it possible that nitrogen could become limiting under those circumstances? So again, here's some data collected. This is the ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus on the x-axis, and the y-axis is the percent of the total phytoplankton population, which is composed of blue-green algae. So you see, as as the ratio decreases, that is, the denominator of phosphorus increases, we get more and more blue-green algae or cyanobacteria in the phytoplankton population. If the ratio is fairly high, and I think the cutoff point here was 28 or something, there's hardly any cyanobacteria in the phytoplankton population that is high, lots of nitrogen with respect to phosphorus. Why does this occur? Blue-green cyanobacteria are capable of fixing nitrogen very much like the bacteria in the root nodules of clover. They can draw nitrogen from the atmosphere, and what's the atmospheric content of nitrogen? 78%, right?
Yep.
Nobody else can do that. There are very, very few organisms that can make atmospheric nitrogen. It's a triple bonded molecule that's very difficult to break. So other organisms must rely on nitrate or nitrite or ammonia to get their nitrogen content. But these cyanobacteria can pull nitrogen out of the atmosphere and do very well even under low nitrogen conditions. So again, that's the second characteristic of cyanobacteria: buoyancy regulation and now nitrogen fixation. And the third one is, the third characteristic is unpalatability. All these small cells are prone to be preyed upon by filter-feeding crustaceans. And you might have heard them called water fleas, but they're about a millimeter in maximum size. That's 1/1000th of a meter. That is about yo big. And they just sit there and they have filtering appendages that look like eyelashes, I suppose. And they just sweep the water and continually filter out particles and kind of sweep them into the gullet. So an example is this Daphnia species. It's got 5 pairs of matched not really legs, because they're not ambulatory, they're just filtering appendages that sweep the water in kind of a rhythm and filter out particles. The problem with the cyanobacteria is they've evolved a defense mechanism. They synthesize chemicals in their cells that make them distasteful or sometimes outright toxic. And if you try to raise organisms like this, Daphnia, for instance, on a diet of blue-green algae, the egg production goes way down and the lives are very much shortened. So the third characteristic is they're almost immune to predation pressure, whereas other algal species are readily consumed by these organisms. So the trifecta then is, imagine a lake with a high phosphorus to nitrogen ratio, or a low nitrogen to phosphorus ratio, and a fairly large population of cells, many of which now are cyanobacteria, and it's breezy and the lake is mixed, but then suddenly we get a calm period, everything flows to the surface, and there's no predation pressure on those cells. And we end up with a hazardous algal bloom. Why hazardous? Well, I just mentioned these toxins that the cells produce, and they're endotoxins. They're living with, the toxins are within the cell. So as long as the cell is intact, it's not harmful at all. But when these Daphnia consume the cells, they're ruptured in the gut tract and poison or create an awful taste for the crustaceans. Or when the cells come up to the surface and they're stuck on the surface because they're overbuoyant and they start to decompose because of high UV radiation and high temperatures when they're trapped in the surface layer, the cells are breaking down and releasing these toxic compounds into the water. And that's why these cyanobacterial blooms are called toxic or harmful algal blooms. Okay? So here are the poisons that have been identified. These are hepatotoxins. These cause liver damage. Now, these toxins weren't evolved to defend or to be annoying for us. I mean, they evolved billions of years ago as a predatory defense compound. But they do have physiological effects on humans, or on all mammals, in fact. These are liver toxins. These microcystins, nodularins, and spermins. And those are all hepatotoxins. The next one is neurotoxins. Anatoxin A, another form of it, and toxins. And these guys all affect do nerve damage. And finally, the third one is dermatoxins, These cause skin rashes and sometimes breathing problems if you inhale kind of a spray or an aerosol of splashy water. And these are these are the two that have been identified. And what you should notice is that you go back to it's like the neurotoxin. Well, no, don't back up. Go forward. Go back the other way. These hepatotoxins. Remember microcystis and anabina and infantoma? These toxins are found in those three species, and those are the three species that generally cause algal blooms. And the neurotoxins, again, forward. Phantasoma, anabina, phantasoma. So these three species are the main culprits in cyanobacterial blooms. So, what do you do if you see an algal bloom? Stay out of the water. First of all, even if you swim in the water, you might get a rash or respiratory problems. Keep your pets out of the water because pets are absolutely not squeamish. If you've had a Labrador Retriever, you know their diet is kind of broad. They will eat or drink anything, and they're not squeamish about lapping up a thick algal bloom. So, if I think the next shot, yeah. So keep your dogs and your livestock out of the water. That'll eliminate some problems. And is there anything we can do? If you've been exposed or your pets have been exposed, what you might do is call your healthcare provider and explain that you think you've been exposed to a toxic algal bloom, a toxic cyanobacterial bloom, and then that would alert them to a specific set of conditions that they could grill you about. Or you could call the Poison Control Center and explain what was going on, or report any illness to the Pennsylvania State Department of Health, and this will alert individuals that this particular lake at this particular time is having an issue. Generally, these blooms are ephemeral. That is, if the wind comes back and mixes these algae deep in the water again, then they're not accumulating on the surface, and the lake looks better, a lot less green. So what can we do to prevent these, if anything?
No,
Yeah.
I might want to add that we can't pick it up with the harvester.
Oh, no, these are,
It just falls right through the,
yeah, well, I mentioned this, 1 millionth of a meter in size, each one of these cells.
Yeah.
So I mean, the filter that I showed you was a very, very fine micron mesh filter. You can't pick them up with a butterfly net, they'll go right through.
Yeah.
They're very, very small. So what can we do? There's a long-term strategy, or actually do short-term strategies first. Many blooms will disappear if it rains or if the wind comes back up and mixes the cells down, and they'll disappear. That's not to say the toxins will disappear, but the surface accumulation will break down. We can spray them with herbicides, either copper sulfate or there's a peroxide thing, and you can spray it, but this sprays can only be applied by a licensed applicator. We've been using aquatic environments consultants from the eastern part of the state to come and spray with weeds. They can also spray for algal blooms if that occurs. The downside is when you spray these things and the cells die, what happens to the endotoxins? They're released from the cells. So the trick is to catch the bloom before it gets too thick and kill the cells before they have large enough concentrations to leave behind lots of toxins. The long-term strategy is we need to reduce the phosphorus concentration. If we can keep the N to P ratio, nitrogen to phosphorus ratio, fairly high, then we can prevent blue-green algae or cyanobacteria from becoming a dominant part of the phytoplankton community. So the way to do that, I mentioned earlier, is if you're going to fertilize lakeside lawns, use a phosphorus-free detergent. I think Scott's, the brand Scott's has a phosphorus-free detergent, phosphorus-free fertilizer. And lawns need nitrogen, they don't need phosphorus. Maintain a well-vegetated stream corridors, that is, prevent erosion on stream channels. Keep them vegetated, don't mow right to the edge of the stream that comes across your property. Contain soil erosion around construction sites. Use phosphorus-free laundry detergents to avoid washing cars on impervious surfaces and so on. Restrict livestock from entering streams. And you can treat lakes with lime or aluminum salts that precipitates phosphorus and sinks it to the bottom. Artificial mixing with air injection or a pump to force the water to circulate even in calm periods has worked on smallish lakes. It'd be, I think, prohibitively expensive to run pumps to mix Conneaut Lake, but it had some success there. So that's my story. Be glad to answer any questions you may have. Yes?
Let's go back to the geese. They are a problem, correct?
Yeah. They can be, yes.
Yeah, well, I had a very dumb question.
Answers are done.
No, this might be dumb. Why can't they come up with some kind of a birth control for geese?
They have a hunting season.
No, I mean, like the corn, put the corn out with some type of a birth control in it. Because geese, my brother-in-law called them flying rats.
That's generous. They're flying manure spreaders. I think there's a political problem. Anytime you try to regulate the population of wild animals, the hunting community gets up in arms.
How about a free clinic on the water?
I read a book called Nature Wars, and they said that the insurance companies shell out between $8 and $10 billion a year in deer damage. Why don't we have a 2-week doe season and get rid of the goddamn things? Well, it's a political issue.
PETA.
Yeah.
PETA would be all over that.
Well, even hunters too. They would like a surplus of deer, so it's when they
But
shoot.
the hunting population's getting less.
I know, but they
Much less.
have leverage. They have political leverage.
Well, there's a lake that we went to, and they had a program to reduce the geese production.
By
where they coated the eggs.
Oh, they coated with
Yeah,
oil?
They coated
Yeah.
the eggs, because if you just took the eggs, then the geese just lay more. So if you coated the eggs, they still sat on their eggs and waited for them to hatch. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
Go and have
And I've heard of programs where they addle the eggs. They pick up goose eggs and give them a good shake to break up the yolk,
Oh.
and then put them. Yeah, but these things are labor intensive.
Right.
And if you've ever encountered a flock of geese, they're pretty defensive about their nest.
And they hurt.
Yeah, I know, I remember. Been there. Yeah.
This seems like a silly question, but we've put string or
Mhm.
on our lakefront, and it definitely has kept them away. Well, why couldn't we put string around the lake, and if they fly in, they can't, and then they fly out and maybe not come back again?
Well, try it. I think most people don't want like a snow fence in front of their.
Yes, it's just one string. It's
Just a string?
one string.
All right.
Keep it about 12 inches off, they can't go under it, and they're too stupid to fly over.
Try it. Encourage your neighbors to
It
try it.
works, we do.
It works? Okay. There you go. Ball of string is what, 69 cents?
Well, it has to be not
Visible.
string, yeah.
Well, like
The twine.
mason's cord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Provide your twice.
Yeah. Or electric fence. Yeah.
How long would it live if it's denied
Who? We talking still on geese?
light? No, not geese.
Oh, not very long at all.
Okay, well then, is there a way to, say you have a floating, like they do for an oil spill, when they float a line around and they contain it?
Yeah.
Would there be a way to do that for a short time and have some kind of a screen that floats and blocks out the light and kills it naturally?
Well-
Because you can't cut it because it'll spread, right?
Okay, the lake is 980
Well-
acres.
I know, but you've isolated it to certain spots.
Okay,
And I'm saying, as needed,
as needed?
that system gets bought one time and it gets moved from place to place to,
Yeah. That would probably work. I think,
I don't know.
if you cut the light down, they have used dyes in the water that turn the water black, nigrosine dye.
Okay, so that's,
And it's not very popular among water skiers and boaters and fishermen, but it turns the water black and
I'm not talking about covering the whole lake. I'm talking about covering an isolated
yeah,
area.
yeah. Yeah, the photosynthetic organisms can't do without light. So that would,
Even if you attached it to the shore and you threw weighted on the other side of the tarp and it came down and covered it.
Would the water spill up over the top of it
Yeah,
with the algae contained?
well, no, they would be underneath the tarp. The algae's coming from the growing, right? From
The algae is suspended in the water.
Okay. Okay, forget that last question.
Okay. Yes,
What, there's, in Florida and other areas, Texas, there, I talked to you, I'm Joe Greco, about grass-eating carp that are triploid, meaning they were bred
yeah,
to not reproduce.
right.
What's the opportunity here?
Well, they eat grass, they don't eat algae. They can be effective weed control vehicle.
For the hydrilla?
I don't know if they eat hydrilla or not. Some organisms have specific tastes and what they will and will not eat.
Aquatic life that do live off it, I mean, other than the,
From what I hear from Florida, that it's become a problem. Hydrillas, completely sealed off lakes. You can't motor through them at all. And it seems like if there was something that could eat hydrilla, they would be onto it pretty quickly. So it's a tropical plant that's expanding northward.
well, I guess one of the big issues is they're thinking that even though they're sterile, that nature kind of reverses that,
Nature finds a way.
finds a way. And that seems to be
Yeah.
the issue with, say, carp.
Yeah.
I have a question. I live on the west side of Conneaut Lake, and I did notice we had late spring, a lot of green algae in our area, in our shore area. All early spring, there was brown water coming in from Thin Ditch, which is, and I traced it back, it goes way back.
Yeah, that muddy water?
Muddy water.
Yeah, that's from
Now,
whatever's going on upstream.
exactly.
Farming or
The
construction.
DEP said it was natural stream erosion. You're saying to prevent these, things from happening, natural stream erosion might be one thing. What can be done to prevent that along the way into the lake? Because I have pictures of it coming in, it's just a sea of brown, and that can't be healthy for the lake.
No, it's not.
And
It's not.
what can we, it's, I guess, all on private property, I don't know, but it's all coming into our lake, and it's not good for the health of the lake. I don't know, is there any, what, I don't know what the answer is, but,
Well, the answer is, determine where it comes from. Does it come from construction sites or from agriculture?
That's what, right, they said they determined it
And
wasn't.
the trick is to get these private property owners or contractors
Right.
to leave a buffer strip of vegetation along, and the buffer strip may need to be 20 or 30 feet wide
Because it's all,
to intercept.
coming from 660 all the way through all that property,
Yeah,
right
yeah.
into our lake.
Yeah.
It's just-
It just requires some enforcement, I think, or some environmental laws that say you can't plow right up to the edge of the stream, or if you have a construction site, put down some barriers against
Sure.
soil erosion. And it has to be enforced. So it needs to be legislation and enforcement.
That's the thing, how do you enforce it on, but it's
Yeah.
an issue.
It's a political issue as much as a scientific one.
And I'm sure True Green and those other places have phosphorus in their
Yes, they do.
fertilizer, don't they?
Yes.
I don't know, I know the Scots make a phosphorus-free lawn.
No, but True Green, when they spray all these houses,
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure what's in their formulation.
yeah, when they do all the lakefront
You
houses,
have to request it.
You have to request specifically to get a phosphorus-free, otherwise they do the phosphorus. There you go. And that, trust but verify.
yes, yes.
Is there a way to educate the lakeside owners as to what, I've been here for about 6 years and I've never heard about phosphorus or what to use, what not to use. Is there any way to educate us lakeside owners?
Well, I hope I did that a little bit today.
Well, yeah, no today, but I mean the people.
But we have a meeting like this every year, and we have an annual meeting.
Answer that. Clama right now has just finished his strategic plan, and we put the down payment on a brand new website. That website, if you guys give us your email addresses, you will get a notification every time there's something posted on that website. That's where your education will come from. And that's why Karen said that what we're doing is we're creating a self-perpetuating business model. We never used to have one. And so now we're going to be rolling these kinds of things out, and that will become a resource for you guys when you want to know what's going on in the lake.
So forward to the people that don't make these meetings.
Can you speak to the study that was done several years ago about how to contain the runoff?
We have the Princeton,
And, I mean, there was a whole study done around the lake at the major areas where the run-in is coming in, and can you speak to that?
Yeah, I
So,
can.
no, you go ahead.
'Cause I did it.
Yeah.
We did a study in 1988 and 89. It was a 13-month study. We were on the lake every week except for, I think, about a 2-week period where the ice was too thick to row through but too thin to walk on, and again in the spring when it was going out. We sampled streams twice a week. We had 13 streams that we monitored. We sampled them twice a week for the full 13 months. And we determined where the phosphorus, what the phosphorus was in the lake and where it was coming from. I think it was 42% of the phosphorus in the lake was being recycled from the bottom. And there's some chemical reactions, you know, algal cells, plant cells, whatever, take up phosphorus, and in the fall they sink to the bottom, become part of the gooky mud that you walk through in deeper water. And this phosphorus is pretty much locked in organic matter. But if the bottom water goes anoxic, which it does, if you measure dissolved oxygen in a profile from surface to the bottom of the lake, you find the bottom water is anoxic. That there's chemical reactions that release this phosphorus back into the water. Now it's trapped in the bottom water, which is very cold and very dense. But in the fall, when the surface water cools down, then it becomes the same density throughout, and wind will mix it, and this phosphorus-rich water gets turned up. So 40 some odd percent of the phosphorus loading of the lake is being recycled internally. Now the other 60% is coming from runoff from various streams. Now some of this, there's not a lot we can do. We live in a geological province, which is mostly sedimentary and metamorphic rock. It's not like we're in the Adirondacks where everything is granite. There's no phosphorus in granite. So these lakes are in pretty decent shape, unless they've got cottages around the outskirts with leaky septic tanks. But we live in an area where the soil is richer in phosphorus because of the geological matrix. So we get some phosphorus runoff in even the best streams, even the completely forested streams. And certainly agriculture and construction and development and road services and lawn fertilizer and agriculture fertilizer, all of this has contributory effects to the phosphorus coming into the lake. I think a copy of that report is in the Sean's library in town here somewhere.
I wonder what a comparative study would show.
In addition to that, CLAMA was formed based on a study done by Coastal years ago when it was initially formed that created a lot of the initiatives that we move forward with. From that study, it was determined education, which is what CLAMA does, is very important. We're allowed to use herbicide treatment to help knock back the weeds, but that's a temporary short term. And the weed harvester is the most effective way that CLAMA can help limit that phosphorus because it helps remove the weeds from the lake so the phosphorus physically leaves the lake. In addition to that, the watershed implementation plan was done, I think that's about 5 years ago now. And it identified a lot of projects that could be done around the lake, but that requires the participation of a lot of different municipal authorities, homeowners, and everybody, and most of those answers are incredibly costly about putting in storm drains and getting rid of all the runoff and stuff like that. Historically, the Conservation District has done a lot of work in the watershed to help reduce all of that coming in and done that with grants. They're more of a silent partner that doesn't get a lot of notoriety, but they've received grants for a lot of money to do that over time, and they continue to do so. One thing about the geese poop problem is that it directly fertilizes the water. So if you have aerators in front of your lakefront, keeping it open for the winter, that's going to be open for them to be defecating all winter long. So if you don't want that in your ground, then let the ice cover the lake and don't keep an aerator there. It's probably not going to protect your dock because the wind is what really gets it when it's breaking up. So take your dock out and let the ice come over, and that will help eliminate some of that. It won't help in the summer, and try the string around the lake. As to the point about the phosphorus-free lawn fertilizer, that is one route to take. Another route to take is to not use a synthetic fertilizer if you need to use a fertilizer, because those are overloaded with excess and all the excess runs off. The grass can only use so much, and whatever it doesn't use, it runs off to feed into the lake. Or just don't use it at all. Instead of calling, what's the name of that? True Green. just set up that auto payment, and send it straight to Klamath. It helps solve the problem. Just shift your dollars over. And a couple last questions, and we're gonna wrap up. John?
I just want to say, the runoff is amazing. You know, this is my 7th year cutting weeds. Right now, we can spend a week up at Finn Ditch and not even put a dent in it. Connie, right down at Farmers Beach, from Farmers Beach along the docks there, that is all the runoff from town. Rainwater, stormwater runoff runs into there. The canal at the north end. Down by Doug's house, coming down. All the runoff from those yards, and like Karen said, everybody wants to have a green yard, but they don't want weeds in the lake. Well, you can't have one without the other one. That is probably, you said 60%. I have to say right now, with the amount of fertilizer going in yards, it's a lot more than that. It is just unbelievable where inlets come into this lake from stormwater runoff, the amount of weeds that grow there is just unbelievable. And it is, in 7 years, I've seen an increase in it. But you've seen more and more of these lawn treatments around the lake, and everybody has a pretty lawn, but it's increased the weeds in the lake. And that's why we need more money.
And even the smallest stream is capturing runoff from maybe 100 to 200 acres and focusing it right where it dumps into the lake. So,
No, and before you leave, I'm worried that some people are gonna think every algae bloom now is this toxic. How do we identify what is a toxic bloom and what isn't?
There are some test kits that you can buy that are fairly cheap. I meant to mention that. There's a company modestly called Gold Standard, something or other. It's a business model. Get it ahead of somewhere here. It's called Gold Standard Diagnostics, I think. Pretty modest of them. But they have little test kits, which are not very expensive, and it gives the results within an hour. You dip the strip in the water and give it time to develop a color reaction on the strip.
But this is
And what
more
does it
like
tell?
the oily looking, the one you were talking about.
The cyanobacteria.
Cyanobacteria. Yeah.
Later, not those little green things that collect on the bottom. And
No, I'm talking about stuff that's suspended in the water, not stuff growing on the surface of the sediment.
Because one of the main problems we're having in this area, just down the road, where we live, is what is called nuisance algae blooms. But it washes up on shore, it's matted, there's nothing we can do, as far as the experts have said, to get rid of it, but it stinks. And it makes disgusting.
But that is probably not the cyanobacteria. It's probably other real forms of algae that are not toxic.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't make it smell any different when it rots, but it's not toxic.
And getting rid of it, and the source, the cause of it is the phosphorus.
Nutrients in the water, Well, think about your garden. What makes your garden greener or your lawn greener? You throw phosphorus on it, or throw nitrogen on it, or whatever nutrient is in short supply. And that's exactly what's happening to the lake. Runoff is bringing nutrients into the lake, and it's going to be green. And Conneaut Lake.
We have a question here, she's been trying for a while.
To give you guys an idea of how much infiltration is coming into the lake from like Finn Ditch, the north, our lake is filling in. Finn Ditch, my husband last year in the fall took his kayak with his pole, with paddle, and kept going and going and going. He was not quite half out and he still could put his pole down. That used to be 15, 20 feet.
Exactly.
The neighbor, Finn Ditch, it's just one of them. So it is a problem, it's a major problem.
It is.
When you go places like off of Wolf Island, you better come all the way out, because otherwise you're going to lose your property. It's a problem.
It is, and the natural life cycle from the lake is eventually to try to become dry land, so we're preserving it as long as we
When I
can.
was young across the 322, that was lake too.
Exactly.
Right. So we're going to wrap up here. We really appreciate you all coming. We can be around to answer some more questions afterwards, but we don't want to take too much of your time. We appreciate you being here, your interest and support. We particularly appreciate all of your donations, because that's how we survive. Thank you, Milt, for all of your expertise. Milt has been instrumental since day one of CLAMA, guiding the lake, and even before, as you know, with that. I'll remind you, Crawford Gives will be coming up on August 24th through 27th, so you'll be seeing things through Facebook and such for that. It's a local donation vehicle where people that donate there can get a match, so it helps give us a little bit more money as well. And there's the CLAMA Dance Party on August 23rd, so come out and have a good time, support CLAMA, and celebrate the end of summer. We hate to see that come, but it is because of all of you that CLAMA exists, so thank you very much. And if you know people that want to be involved or want information, make sure to give us their information so they can be on our mailing lists. So thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.